In the beginning was the Word. And God said, "Let there be light."
Then what happened? Here's the real story behind the creation of mankind.
Everyone's always watching me, waiting for me to make a profound statement or have an epiphany or lead them to the answer, and I didn't have a fucking clue.
Do you think it's possible that if a conscious being is having a thought, if I'm thinking of a particular concept or an idea or an invention, that becomes a permanent part of this information field, that somebody else at some other time can quantum entangle with that frequency, and if they can discern it, then they can actually bring it to fruition? Do you think that's possible?
I like to use the words universal consciousness.
It's my opinion that the information for anything you want to know is already there.
It's inside of all of us.
One of the things about Tesla and Einstein, all through history, you find people go, I didn't invent, like Einstein. He didn't invent it. It came to him in the middle of the night, and he wrote it down. He says that. Tesla woke up one morning and drew out the dynamos we have at Niagara Falls. And what's crazy, he drew them out in detail.
Wow.
So he didn't have a background in that because that's an engineering side.
On January 1st of 2024, an atheist begins having visions of God, the creation of mankind, and the destruction of the earth. Without prior knowledge of any of these ancient tablets or scrolls, begins to recite scriptures that are written down that were removed from the Bible, and all of a sudden knows the changes that were made to the Bible to remove important information from it.
And the story of Noah, which you'll discover in reading this, is not even close to what some of the things they teach you in Bible study, like he had 2 of every kind of animal that came into the ark. That's literally absolutely fabricated, which you'll see soon. It's a fabrication. It didn't happen. They didn't have 2 cockroaches and 2 fleas and 2 gazelles and 2 lions. And
it doesn't take a genius to figure out that there are problems within the scriptures and that the stories can't possibly be true. But for somebody to start reciting actual scriptures from these tablets and from these ancient sources without ever studying them, without having a PhD, without ever spending hours traveling the country and having the luxury of somebody paying for a vacation, for me to be able to witness these things directly, I started to see truth through visions and remote viewing.
And we keep telling kids these fairy tales. You'll find that the story is much different. And then in this, I'm also going to get a tablet that was discovered, which talks about the construction of Noah's Ark, which was not the shape of the boat in the biblical text.
The powerful and wealthy people that rule this planet know the truth, but they conceal it.
The possibilities are as intriguing as the buildings themselves. But maybe that's not where we should start, unraveling the mystery.
We tend today to always look at the actual constructions on the site, rather than starting by looking at the land itself. In all of these cases in the ancient world, and only in very recent times, was the understanding that you always look for the sacred power spots first.
These are locations where life is created,
including pyramids and stone circles and sacred sites around the world, are deliberately located on Earth energy lines or at nodal points.
Most in the West are familiar with the Christian concept, in the beginning was the Word. God spoke the Word and the world into existence. What most don't realize is that, for example, in ancient Egypt, they taught the same thing. There was Ptah, the god of technology.
There is no god of technology.
Who went into his heart and felt the world and then spoke it into existence.
Almost universally, ancient texts and traditions have always placed sound at the core of not only our existence, but the existence of the entire universe. And it begins with the powerful seed syllable, the ancient Om, which originally was never spoken, but it was felt in the body. And this is where the relationship between sound and vibration becomes very important, because ultimately sound is only a vibration brought into an audible range.
In the Hindu tradition, the word was with Brahman, and the word was Brahman. The very first Hebrew letter, Aleph, the sound is like the expression of the thought from that universal mind, or that divine source. The thoughts being expressed out through the sound, which then manifests material universe, material world.
The Pueblo Indians talk about the spider, how she sang the world into existence.
And this is how life was created at these sacred sites.
In Aztec mythology, the god Quetzalcoatl used a conch shell to create the vibration that formed the first wave of life.
I know what I'm saying is fact. No one is supposed to believe it.
The Inuit say, the raven made the world and the waters with the beat of his wings.
Moving all mystery, I speak definitively because I know the truth.
No matter where we go or what time period, there's a belief that sound was fundamental to creation.
Vibration is creation.
And equally remarkable, our own genesis as human beings may well have started in a similar way.
Many agents of Satan are still trying to salvage the biblical text.
Sis says, I have an idea. She says, I'm going to take an egg from one of the women, and they took the egg, and she cleaned out some of the genetic material or whatever they did. They made a zygote. They added some of their essence to the egg. They say essence, I think that's genetic modification in my understanding. They took this zygote, which is what you call in modern science, they put it in her womb. She took it to term 10 months, not 9, 10 months, and then you see her in this famous cylinder scroll holding up this baby saying, my hands have created it. She gave birth to the Adamu, which means first man. And they put Adam in this Eden, E-D-I-N. The guy who ruled over Eden was Satan, the Lord of Eden, in the tablets. And that was actually Enlil. And the Bible calls him Yahweh. They think he's God. That guy's just masquerading as God. It was never God. And this Eden was this laboratory where they would have these mating rituals between the different peoples. And when they got Adam in there, they tried to mate him with these other ones. Wasn't working out. So they said, okay, let's take some DNA from him. Let's make another one of him. They made Eve. Then they mated them and bingo, it worked.
Lots of what he's saying is true, but the first man was not created in this way.
When that embryo becomes less than a millimeter in size, right? Very close to a millimeter, but not quite a millimeter. The embryo already starts to develop the first aspects of the inner ear. So the very first sense organ that is developed within the embryo is the inner ear.
But then at 16 to 24 weeks, the neurodevelopment has taken place to a point where all my 5 senses come online, except my eyes are closed and I'm in the dark, and my nose and mouth are filled with fluids, so those aren't active. But sound travels through water 5 times better than through air. So my total experience when I'm in the womb is hearing and vibration sense.
That sound coming in to the fetus, to the embryo, is essential for the development of the fetus. The mother's voice, as well as voices and sounds from the environment outside, the language that is spoken by the mother, by the father, those things are being heard by that developing fetus. And as they're coming in through its own ears, it's wiring its nervous system.
True, you can actually alter DNA through vibration while the child's developing.
There are 3 times as many connections from the ears to the brain as there are from the eyes to the brain. The auditory nerve directly connects to every organ in the body.
It's like we're baptized in sound and vibration and water. And we all have our own mini evolution that takes place.
Ancient pyramids, the marveled wonders of the world that have mystified and enchanted people of the modern era since their discovery, found on almost every continent on Earth, these impressive structures command a certain reverence.
80,000 pyramids in the world now. So far we thought that the pyramids were the pharaoh's tombs, or there are places to do some ceremonials.
They rebuilt the land of Chem out of the mud because there was a great flood. So we're talking about ancient knowledge. They began to create these mystery schools at this dawn of this new era 36,000 years ago. The gentleman who started this, his name was Thoth, T-H-O-T-H. And he's known as a wisdom keeper. He's known all over the entire world, but he ruled over the land of Kemet for 14 or 16,000 years, roughly thereabout, according to the ancient Egyptians. And then he left there and went to Mesoamerica and kickstarted the Teotihuacan in Mexico City. That was all his master architectural plan. And Teotihuacan is part of his African name, which is also known as Tahuti. And Teotihuacan in Mexico really means the city of Tahuti.
Of 80,000 pyramids in the world with similar construction, Thoth did not create them all. This is not his design.
Okay.
Seems to be related very much to do with the idea of an ancient code to be found within the Great Pyramid. It's within the geometry, not just of the pyramid itself, but its relationship to the other two main pyramids of the Giza Plateau.
All pyramids are similar.
It's the foundation of a high-level civilization.
Nothing was done accidentally. I mean, it was all perfectly engineered.
All the pyramids that we're rediscovering today around the world, no one has addressed what is the stitching element.
The stitching element is the sites where these megaliths were constructed, not how they were constructed. Ancient man had built these megaliths on top of sites that we know as crop circles. Places where in the book of Enoch had said that lightning would leave marks on the earth. For many years now, scientists had confirmed or acknowledged that unlike when lightning strikes, it appears as though it comes from the heaven and hits the earth. Lightning actually comes from the earth and hits the stratosphere. Well, that is exactly how this frequency radiates from the center of the earth upwards. It has a shape. It has a form. It gives shape and form to matter.
Now, a ley line is believed to be an invisible path or energy line that connects sacred sites. Ley lines are thought to create a network of energy across the earth, influencing the flow of energy and aligning with cosmic forces. The area around Stonehenge is on one of those ley lines. If crop formations are an attempt at communication, they're clearly using mathematic concepts, and this would make sense. Math is a universal language.
These are the points on the Earth that have a particular power to them, that have a particular vibrational quality. And that vibrational quality is actually the energy quality of the original unified field, the singularity state, the one that everything came out of.
They seem to be intended for transmuting or channeling the energy for healing or ceremonial purposes.
Each one of these sites has a specific different purpose. The Great Pyramid in Giza and the other temples are sites where human beings were created all at once across the globe. The reason that man was populating every single continent on Earth is because they were created at the exact same time at each of these temples. Now, some of the other temples that you'll find in grass or in farmland, they're creating seeds for plantation, for crops. There's other ones for creating animals.
They will have the ability to help to harmonize energetic fields and consciousness.
The primary function was to create life, but then after that, any of these sites, if you visit them, you can realign your body, you can heal, you can use these places, these locations to connect to God's consciousness.
Everywhere you look on the planet, you find these magnetic nodes which have these power locations coming up out of the earth, whipping around the planet. But these locations are where a lot of the ancient temples and structures are built.
Picturing the earth like this, you can see the magnetic lines all over earth, and they do move around. Now think about when you see a crop circle form, the orbs that they see, they're not flying saucers, they're not spaceships. They are an electrical magnetic energy that manifests in the shape of a ball. Now if you think about the earth from a distance, the magnetic lines, when they're contacting the earth, they move across the earth pretty quickly. From a distance, it may not seem like very far distance, but if you were standing in front of one, it would move very quickly, hundreds of miles, and change direction erratically. When one of these magnetic lines contacts one of the nodes on the earth, then you get a crop circle and you get the creation of life. When they're visible to the naked eye, they're actually moving very slowly in comparison to their normal movements.
Biggest power spot becomes where the palace of the ruler will be formed.
Mankind
creates physiostatic electricity, which these ions rush up into the pyramid itself. It comes out of the apex of these pyramids.
Another way to look at this energy current is from a sonic or musical perspective.
The intention of the pyramids, why they were built, was so that we can magnify the effects, the healing effects, and radiate it out onto the people that lived around the pyramid to be able to make the people prosperous, to keep them healed and in tune with the earth's natural frequency. That is the purpose. The crop circle created life. Man created the temples to magnify this life-giving force.
The Mayans learned about some of the secrets of the sounds and frequencies that are emanating from that location. Depending on where you're standing, you can hear different sounds. If you clap or make a certain noise, you can get different echoes back.
All of these are nodal points on a web or a matrix of energy across the Earth's surface.
It was a big white flash of light that completely encompassed the landscape. As far as I know, this is the only time that anything like this, where continuous footage, continuous tapes have been running all night and captured the field and eliminated any evidence of anybody being in there with any laser alignment measurement devices or lights of any kind. As far as I know, this is the best footage and most comprehensive footage available of when the crop circle takes.
This controversial film appears to show strange objects hovering above a cornfield. Below, complex circle formations appear.
The American Professor Hawkins has established that the geometric relationship between various patterns contained in some pictograms is identical to the mathematical relationship existing between two notes on a piano. In other words, some pictograms are the figurative correspondent of a sound, impressed on a wheat field.
This particular circle resembles what's called a cymatic pattern. A cymatic pattern is a shape that forms when sound waves vibrate a material like water or sand. Ernst Chladni was a German physicist and musician who documented cymatic patterns. He proved that different sound frequencies create different patterns, and these patterns could be predicted and repeated.
Right here is the point where life is created. It doesn't matter if it's a plant, it's an animal, whatever it is. The prime resonant frequency for whatever is being created, whatever life is being created, is formed at these points in the center of the crop circle when the electric magnetic energy pulls the matter that your body or whatever is being created, pulls the matter together into a specific shape, and then it's imparted with magnetic and electric energy. Human beings are just matter. Your life force is electromagnetic. That is what you are. When your electromagnetic essence leaves your body, you're dead. Your body starts to disintegrate. That's what holds it together. It's held in place with frequency and then imparted with the electrical spark of life. That's what the Voynich manuscript is depicting. This manuscript that was written in a language that is lost and nobody can no longer read is showing the ascension of a pregnant woman from the core of the earth. She's not physically a woman until the resonant frequency reaches the crust of the earth and is formed through the matter. But the Voynich manuscript is showing the ascension of a soul, and then at the surface, the creation of the body and the union of the body and the soul.
The design is a Julia set, a type of fractal. Fractals are visual representations of mathematic formulas that repeat themselves at different scales. Zoom way in or way out, the pattern is the same. Look at how close Stonehenge is to the formation. Look at the visibility. Stonehenge has 24-hour security. The guards saw nothing unusual the night before.
Certain geometric proportions were considered sacred in the past and used in the construction of ancient temples, which gives a special harmony to everything realized. In the 90s, some of the pictograms which appeared were real fractals. These diagrams are obtained by complex mathematical calculations, represented by a computer graphic, and show surprising analogies with the forms we know in nature. They are complex diagrams which are impossible to calculate even in small dimensions without the help of a computer. And the pictograms we are seeing are real fractals, not their representations. The first one appeared on August the 13th, 1991.
Mandelbrot set itself is, as you know, a fractal, and it represents that state which exists in as a geometry.
And the people in ancient Egypt that knew how to work with this vibrational matrix were literally called in the documents from ancient Egypt the masters of the net.
Could it be that the masters of the net were leaving us a spiritual blueprint for all ages?
If you look at the Teotihuacan pyramid complex in Mexico, right by Mexico City, you discover something amazing. First of all, they have the same exact alignment of the 3 pyramids at Giza by the Great Pyramid. The second thing is that the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan is exactly 50% of the height of the Great Pyramid located at Giza in Egypt.
This seems to be a sleight of hand. Way too much emphasis is placed on the construction of the pyramids and not what they're actually used for.
What does this tell us?
Who were the masters of the net? And where do we find them in the ancient texts?
Biblically, we have the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho.
Joshua, who is the successor of Moses, who was trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, has an extraordinary way of bringing down these walls. The Lord tells him to have his warriors walk around the perimeter of the walls of Jericho once a day for 6 days. They're following 7 priests who have ram's horns in their hands, and they're also carrying the Ark of the Covenant.
Whether it's healing purposes or for destructive purposes, it requires 2 frequencies, a low-pitched tone and a high-pitched tone. Now, the Ark of the Covenant radiated nuclear radiation, creating the low tone that was in concert with the prime resonant frequency of the walls.
While the priests simultaneously blow a long blast with their horns.
And then at one point they gave a great shout, and the walls came down.
What that tells us is that they're walking in unison, they're shouting in unison, and with that sound, they're able then to bring down the walls of Jericho.
The ancient people possibly had a way to reach sympathetic resonance with each other and with a given material, such as stone, and its particular density, which is also a frequency.
If they knew the correct resonant frequency of whatever made up the walls, they could have conceptually used sound in that manner.
The Bible makes clear that it wasn't the Ark of the Covenant that brought down those walls. It was the power of sound and the unified consciousness of the soldiers and the priests.
Anything powerful can be used to heal or to harm.
The ancient solfeggio scale, known as just intonation, is renowned for its use in the Gregorian chants, but its history can be traced back to biblical times. The 6-tone scale, and an additional 3 tones discovered since, is considered by many musicologists and scientists to have effect on the mind and body. The monks used the original 6 solfeggio notes. Unfortunately, by the 16th century, the scale was lost, though the exact cause is unknown. But why exactly is this important? The solfeggio scale is mathematically consistent with the patterns of our universe. Frequencies are magnetic tones that are required to have the power to heal and raise consciousness. This ancient scale has far-reaching potential, from repairing emotional trauma and opening up spiritual consciousness to deepening our relationships and altering DNA. The atoms in our bodies, the molecules and atoms in inanimate objects, thoughts, and sounds, all things in our universe are in motion, vibrating. Even the planet itself vibrates and resonates at its own frequency. The human ear can only hear a limited range of vibrations per second. In science, the number of vibrations per second is known as frequency, measured in hertz. Vibrational signature of certain sounds, ranging from 174 hertz to 963 hertz, can positively impact our mental, physical, and spiritual health. They form the basis of ancient sacred music traditions dating back to the 8th century, such as the Gregorian chants and Indian Sanskrit chants. Is an alpha-theta brainwave frequency in the human brain. Alpha-theta brainwave frequency is a relaxed, dreamy, sleepy state that's also when cell regeneration and healing happen. It's no surprise that people nowadays, especially in bigger cities, are unbalanced, irritated, reactive, and angry, and diseases are rising in astronomical numbers. The electromagnetic fields generated by power supply systems, telecommunications, appliances, computers, and other technology produced by humans are extremely powerful, and in some cases have been associated with increased incidences of cancer, heart disease, depression, and other diseases. Exposure to strong electromagnetic fields have been documented as significantly increasing the incidence or risk of some diseases.
What they're not saying is it requires two frequencies. You have to have a low tone and a high tone, your pilot tone, that will make the alterations in your genome. But some of this is intentional, and you have to be careful. You go on YouTube and you pull up a frequency because it's passive genocide, population control, eugenics. If they can get you to induce harmful frequencies on yourself to cause yourself cancer, to reduce the population voluntarily in a passive manner to where they not responsible. They just know that they put some frequencies available to the public are harmful for you, and they present them in a way that they're very good for you, so that way you'll go ahead and induce it on yourself. You can tell if you get a bad frequency, because I induce resonant frequencies on myself, and if I get one that's bad or harmful, my eyes will turn bloodshot or I'll get a headache. So, I mean, there's tells, and you just need to know where you're getting your frequencies from. You can pull them off YouTube, but you have to test it, and if you get any adverse effects, immediately stop it. You might think, why would somebody do this? But they create computer viruses all the time. There are people that would like to see less people in the world, and they'll mislabel something as 528, or they'll say that it's a certain frequency, but the one that they upload is not the frequency that they say it is. Unless you know what 528 supposed to sound like, you're not going to know, hey, that's not 528. If you're testing a bunch of different ones and you find good ones, you'll know because you'll feel tingling. Your cells in your body, in your head, in your arms, wherever you induce it, you will feel a tingling whenever you hit the prime resonant frequency. And then the reconstructive, you'll feel good when it's done. If it's negative, if it's bad for you, you will have a negative effect. But you don't want to continue doing that to yourself. You want to identify the ones that are good for you and use those, because you can reconstruct your body in this manner. You can restore vitality, restore health, energy. You can restore cognitive function, memory. All the things that ail us as human beings can be reversed with resonant frequencies. You can kill cancer with it. This is a real thing. And they've known this forever, but they can't sell you medicine if you're going to holistic doctors. They can't sell you medicine if you're correcting yourself through vibration. They can't kill off the population and maintain control when we know that all the power spots are good for us, so we can rejuvenate ourselves. It is the fountain of youth. Maybe you don't become young again, but it will restore your cell structure, and you will become what you were intended to be. And you can reharmonize yourself with the Earth's divine natural frequencies and gain access to knowledge that is being hidden from the world. You know, there's a divine consciousness. There's a bank of information. Let's say a database full of all the Earth's information, all the science, mathematics, everything. And if you can reduce yourself, connect to the God consciousness, to the cosmic consciousness, universal, call it what you want. If you connect to this, you will gain knowledge and ability in all areas of your life, from mathematics to science to whatever. You'll become an inventor. All of these things, there's a reason that this has been kept from everybody, from the entire world.
Now, many of us have seen this very charming young man on the internet who shatters crystal glasses with his powerful voice. But if you watch him carefully, you'll see that first he taps the glass with his finger and listens. The glass sings its natural resonant pitch. Then he takes a deep breath and sings a loud, long note. He induces a resonant vibration in the crystal glass. The vibration grows larger and larger and larger until the glass is shattered. On the other end of the scale, we have a giant bridge made out of concrete and steel, a suspension bridge, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Cars and trucks and buses are going over it every day. And unfortunately, where they built this bridge, there was a steady wind blowing across it. And one day this wind induces a small vibration in the bridge, hardly noticeable. But the frequency of the vibration matches the resonant frequency of some part of the bridge. And the vibration gets larger and larger and larger until the bridge collapses into the river below. A destructive, resonant frequency. So on one end of the scale, we have a giant concrete and steel bridge destroyed by resonance. And on the other, we have a small crystal glass shattered. So maybe we could shatter something even smaller, something really small, something you would need a microscope to see. Maybe we could shatter a living microorganism. So maybe we could change a biological living liquid crystal with a special electronic signal. But in order to do that, we would need some kind of device. So we search the US patent database and we find this invention by a physician, Dr. James Bear of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's called a resonant frequency therapy device, and its purpose is to induce a resonant vibration in a living organism or cell. If I put in, say, 100 hertz, out will come 100 pulses per second. If I put in 200 hertz, we'll get 200 pulses. So now we're searching for the magic frequency. And we start with 100 hertz, and we look through the microscope to see if anything's happening. We watch for 5 minutes. Nothing happens. Over the course of 15 months, we try hundreds and hundreds of frequencies, if not thousands, until we find the magic combination. The answer is you have to have 2 input frequencies, one low, one high, and the higher frequency must be 11 times the lower. It's what we musicians would call the 11th harmonic. And when we add the 11th harmonic, we begin to shatter microorganisms like a crystal glass. These are the first videos taken. We showed these videos to our friends in the biology department. They said they hadn't seen anything quite like it. Seems to be a new phenomenon. These organisms are being shattered by our electronic signals. We now know that cancer is vulnerable between the frequencies of 100,000 hertz and 300,000 hertz. So now we attack leukemia cells. Leukemia cell number 1 tries to grow a copy of itself, but the new cell is shattered into dozens of fragments and scattered across the slide. Leukemia cell number 2 then hyperinflates and also dies. Leukemia cell number 3 then tries to make another cancer cell. The new cell is shattered and the original cell dies.
By its observation of solfeggio frequencies on the nervous system. It's cellular repair, helping the body's tissue and organs to regenerate. Cell repair is also useful to the skin, assisting in the healing of burns, lacerations, and other damage. This cellular repair is innately linked to the immune system, where the health of B and T cells is vitally important for fighting off viruses and diseases. It's noted as a natural anesthetic, relieving pain both physically and energetically, while giving our organs a greater sense of security and comfort, which takes us to the highest plane of consciousness. This frequency connects us with the perfection of the universe, allowing us to tap into the oneness that permeates everything that is and will be. Frequency relates to the crown chakra, which is also linked to the pineal gland, which is the central nervous system. Through this, we can access high-level intuition, telepathy, psychic vision, and an intimate connection with God.
And ancient temples are the same thing. One is made of stone, the other one is made of crushed wheat.
These electromagnetic radiated patterns that we find on the Earth happen all over the world. They happen in the Arctic, they happen under snow, they happen underwater.
He heard a strange buzzing sound. He climbed down from his tractor and started walking in the direction of the sound. Then he saw a circular craft slowly rise above a section of swampland not 50 feet from where he was standing. The craft hovered for a few seconds, shot straight up into the sky and disappeared.
A craft as in a UFO. That's the cover story for this type of phenomenon.
When George went to investigate, he found a large circle of reeds had been pulled from the swamp and flattened into a disc. The circle was 30 feet across, 2 feet thick, and arranged in a clockwise swirl. Because of the swirl and the thickness of the reeds, locals call the formation a UFO nest. But what this actually was was a crop circle.
A crop circle that was formed in the middle of a dry lake bed in Oregon. It was seen in the newspapers around there in the area when this happened. Just an incredible story. If you go on Google, you can find this. It's east of the Steens Mountains there in Oregon. But just an incredible story, because from 9,000 feet is what you're looking at right here. And you can clearly see what is there in front of you here. This huge pattern was scored into the dry lake bed in Oregon, and just an unbelievable story, because there were some pilots that flew over the area. They're from the Idaho National Guard.
If you look at the foundation formation, it looks just like El Castillo. Now, if you want to know why the Mayan temple is shaped the way that it is, I'm not going to credit them for being the greatest designers in architecture. Yes, their methods of moving stone are completely important. It is amazing, but it's all something that we're supposed to know right now. And as far as getting the alignment correct with the Earth's geometry and the moon and the stars and that type of planetary alignment, all they did was follow a pattern. It's like taking crayons and coloring a picture in.
And these lines are literally 10 inches wide and 3 inches deep. Every single line in this entire formation is 10 inches wide and 3 inches deep. So again, this is on hard pan desert type dirt. So it's very compacted, very difficult to score into.
In ancient times, we would build a temple on top of this location.
That's 3 inches deep.
The Sri Yantra is a highly intricate geometric diagram. It begins with an outer square, which represents stability and creates a solid foundation for the yantra. It also creates a boundary around the inner world, separating it from worldly existence. In Vedic tradition, the square connects to the earth element. Each side of the yantra has an open gate, which invites you into the center. These gates represent the threshold between the inner and the outer worlds. The next step features 3 concentric circles. These represent the past, present, and the future. It also represents the universe, as the Hindu vision of the universe is a set of concentric circles. But the 3 circles also symbolize the Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Within the first circle is a 16-petal lotus, representing complete fulfillment of all hopes and desires. But each of these petals is also associated with a particular aspect of existence, including the 10 organs of perception and action, which are ears, skin, eyes, tongue, nose, mouth, feet, hands, arms, genitals, and the 5 Vedic elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. The 16th petal represents the mind, which integrates and interprets information received from these sources. So, this lotus circle symbolizes the external sensory world and the way humans interact with it. The 8 lotus petals of the inner ring each has its own symbolism. Each petal governs an activity of the human consciousness. These are speech, grasping, motion, excretion, enjoyment, revulsion, attraction, and equanimity. These 8 lotus petals signify the transcendence from a purely physical existence to a more enlightened state of being. It represents the subtle experiences and powers you can acquire in the process of spiritual awakening. Within the inner lotus is the first set of interlocked triangles. A fundamental meaning of the Sri Yantra is the union of the divine masculine and feminine. This is symbolized by the 9 interlaced upward and downward pointing triangles. These 9 main triangles further overlap and intersect to form 43 smaller triangles. These 43 triangles are then organized into concentric circuits, or avarana. Each of these circuits is associated with specific groups of deities and represents various aspects of the cosmos and the human existence. The downward pointing triangles represent the feminine principle, while the upward pointing triangles symbolize the masculine principle. Together, these triangles embody the process of cosmic creation and the unity of the universe. The central triangle is the giver of all perfection. In the middle of the central triangle is a bindu, or the central dot. It's the ultimate destination of this spiritual journey. It represents pure consciousness, the source of all creation and the ultimate truth of existence. The journey to this point signifies the merging of the individual self into the supreme self, the final aim of many spiritual traditions. Often associated with the Hindu school of philosophy known as Tantra,
It's also found in Buddhism, Jainism, and various New Age practices. Many believe it predates all these traditions and perhaps as old as the Vedic period. In the realm of myth and legend, it's said to be the tool that goddess Lalita used to recreate the universe after its destruction.
They're the points of the earth that the Creator used to repopulate the earth after each catastrophe. Or you can believe that Noah traveled the whole entire world to get 2 of every animal and squeezed them all in one boat.
These are called ghost formations or ghost circles. This is when the design of a crop formation is still visible after the field has been plowed. Sometimes a ghost formation remains through the following season. Sometimes it remains for 2 years before finally fading.
Does it make sense that all these polytheistic religions, Native Americans, and all over the world, all Aborigines used to pray to the god of the crops to get a good yield? They knew that these existed. They knew that these crop circles appeared.
Buseto had been moved through the air to the sound of a trumpet.
So, the thing that I hear the most about you, and you can tell me if this is true or not, is that you have power of levitation. And as a magician, this is something that I'm fascinated with.
Your magic is fantastic, but we're not the same the Buddhist meditations.
Yes, I understand. I know you don't want to teach me how to do it or tell me any of your what you do, but maybe I could just witness it.
You come from a very far away. You show me your skill. I don't know what happened, but I will try one time.
Okay, great.
I need you back. If you still close me, then my energy doesn't roll. Yes.
Okay.
This is what it is to know God, the ability to manifest His divine power in order to perform different tasks.
How is he doing that? Are you guys seeing this? Are you guys seeing this? Wow. There's no wires. I don't see anything. This is crazy.
All of us sit here in disbelief that one man was capable of doing this, when the truth is every man is capable of doing it. This is what we've been kept from knowing.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
Jesus was the greatest prophet that ever lived. He was capable of performing all of these tasks. By claiming he was equivalent to God was to say that the miracles that he performed couldn't be performed by anybody, and that's just not the case. Today we rely on technology in order to do things that we did with spirituality. And if the government were to take a round floating metal disc and do the same exact thing, wouldn't people think it's a UFO? Religions were established to point to who men are to pray to prevent them from gaining this type of ability. It's a real threat to authority when one man wields the power of an entire army. Jesus was teaching other people to do this. It scared the shit out of authority.
Legends of a time when man could lift heavy stones with sound alone. Within ancient texts that survive to this day, great cities were erected by means of sonic technology and acoustic levitation. Some say it was by the sound of a trumpet or a harp. Others say it was by the chanting of mystical incantations or even just a whistle.
Swedish Dr. Jarl studied at Oxford. During those times, he became friends with a young Tibetan student. A couple of years later, it was 1939, and Dr. Jarl made a journey to Egypt.
This Swedish doctor who studied at Oxford, he was studying at the Egyptian pyramids in 1939, and he made a trip from Egypt to Tibet. And there he was seen by his messenger of his friend, a Tibetan friend, and urged him to come to Tibet to meet the High Lama. One day, his friend took him to a place in the neighborhood of the monastery and showed him a sloping meadow, which was surrounded in the northwest by high cliffs. In one of the rock walls, a height of about 250 meters, was a big hole, which looked like an entrance to a cave. In front of this hole, there was a platform on which the monks were building a rock wall. The only access to this platform was from the top of the cliff, and the monks lowered themselves down with the help of ropes. In the middle of the meadow, about 250 meters from the cliff, was a polished slab of rock with a bowl-like cavity in the center. The bowl had a diameter of 1 meter and a depth of 15 centimeters. A block stone was maneuvered into this cavity by a yak oxen. The block was 1 meter wide and 1.5 meters long. Then 19 musical instruments were set into an arc of 90 degrees at a distance of 63 meters from the stone slab. The radius of 63 meters was measured out accurately. This is very important, apparently. The musical instruments consisted of 13 drums and 6 trumpets. Now, this is where it gets like really kind of crazy and like maybe woo-woo or whatever. But anyways, behind each trumpet was a row of monks. When the stone was in position, the monk behind the small drum gave a signal to start the concert. The small drum had a very sharp sound and could be heard even with the other instruments making a terrible din. So like those horns, we just heard them playing, right? Mm-hmm. All the monks were singing and chanting a prayer, slowly increasing the tempo of this unbelievable noise. During the first 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then as the speed of the drumming and the noise increased, the big stone block started to rock and sway. And suddenly it took off into the air with an increasing speed in the direction of the platform in front of the cave, 250 meters high. After 3 minutes of ascent, it landed on the platform. Continuously, they brought new blocks to the meadow, and the monks using this method transported 5 to 6 blocks per hour on a parabolic flight path approximately 500 meters long and 250 meters high. From time to time, a stone split and the monks moved the split stones away. Quite an unbelievable task. The film showed exactly what they had witnessed. The English society for which Dr. Jarl was working confiscated the 2 films and declared them classified. They will not be released until 1990.
You're talking about English Central Intelligence that are working for the crown.
But there are also designs that, at first glance, look like geometry, but not exactly right. That's when some researchers had the idea to stop looking and start listening. This particular circle resembles what's called a cymatic pattern. A cymatic pattern is a shape that forms when sound waves vibrate a material like water or sand. Ernst Chladni was a German physicist and musician who documented cymatic patterns. He proved that different sound frequencies create different patterns, and these patterns could be predicted and repeated. Could the builder of this crop circle be telling us that this sound frequency has special meaning? If it does, how do we apply it?
Ancient societies made record of this with hieroglyphs.
Looks like, for our listeners, looks almost like a cross. So this is a hieroglyph in Egypt, okay? And I took this from Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge book. This particular hieroglyph is a pretty common one if anybody watches, shows about Egypt. But you notice that big circle in the middle? Does that kind of look like the frequency we were just looking at over here?
I mean, the fact that it's a cross does, but aside from that, no.
And the diagonal's coming out too. Now, what we have on the left here is we have the humans. They were the ones that were working and building. And then on the right, we had the pharaohs or the gods or whatever. Interesting. Also, look how much bigger they are. They're like 12 feet tall, which we're going to get into giants in another episode, so we don't need to get into that today. But what it seems that this person is sitting on a chair, and it's a little blurry here, but what you have underneath the chair is you have two lions, and they're facing in opposite directions, which denotates some kind of magnetic polarity. And then this field amplifier device. When I see this, it brings me back to the myths and the legends, but that, Merlin, Thoth, they had these kind of devices in their hand that were able to do something with sound, right? And then here we see this circle that's showing this frequency that's, it's debatable how similar it is, but I think it's, pretty similar. And then underneath it would be the rock that they're levitating. And they're showing us that the one guy is lifting it with one hand. Over here behind them, you have two men that are whistling. They have flutes. It's just a little hard to see. So that's really interesting to me. And I'm going to compare that with the photo that we just saw. So if you can see a little bit more directly, like it's not a perfect match, obviously. But another thing I wanted to point out, again, this is a little blurry photo. So for our viewers or listeners, definitely dive in on this one. But right here is actually, it's the moon. So it shows the moon at a certain crescent, right? So I'm wondering in my brain, I'm just thinking out loud here, does that mean that when they do this stuff, it has to be at a certain, lunar phase? And then there's two other frequencies next to it.
So during a lunar eclipse, and the other two frequencies would be the two different flutes.
They were engineers, they were scientists, they had a lot of skill. There's no way that it was slaves dragging stones on rollers.
Many people don't know this, but in fact it's not a four-sided pyramid. It has a very slight concavity on each side, making it an eight-sided pyramid. Now, the minute you do this, it produces rather bizarre geometry.
Historical photos do not show an eight-sided pyramid. Lots of recently uploaded videos and pictures do show this.
It produces rather bizarre geometry. Produces numbers. Numbers keep popping out. Numbers that shouldn't be there. Things like a universal constant, that has been known for over 100 years. The phi constant, the golden ratio, but we have now strange numbers like Euler's number coming up in the design.
This thing is 481 feet high. It has a footprint of slightly more than 13 acres. It weighs 6 million tons. It consists of 2.5 million individual blocks of stone. You're taking that whole gigantic mountain of stone and you are aligning it within just 3/60ths of a single degree of true north. We're not talking about magnetic north, which varies. We're talking about astronomical north, the true north of this planet.
And it wasn't aligned by man. They just dropped it on a ley line for a crop circle.
The questions come up. Who did it? Why? For what purpose exactly? I again suggest they did it for the gods. They taught our ancestors in astronomy, in mathematics. The pyramid was constructed, which Enoch had the planning, the engineering planning.
Since the 1960s, thousands of crop circles or crop formations have been found. They've been seen on every continent in almost every country on Earth. But the epicenter for crop formations is Wiltshire in the southwest of England.
By now, I think it's time we quit calling them crop circles because they appear everywhere. How about Earth symmetry or Earth cymatics?
Pyramids are the ancient technologies. We used to build these structures because it was a physical way in which we could be connected to the ninth dimensions by always vibration of these tune forks. All the pyramids in the world are aligned.
Thanks to satellite imagery, pyramidal structures continue to be found all over the world, underground, in jungles, under ice, and even under oceans. Though the Egyptian desert sands are a commonly conjured image when envisioning pyramids, These resilient structures have been discovered on every continent, in every climate on Earth.
They're finding them in Antarctica, all over Serbia. Many, many, many different countries now are coming up with pyramids.
I spend a lot of time in the jungles of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Belize, and Mexico. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pyramids, 250 pyramids in China. Then you ask yourself, hey, if the pyramids are not only in Egypt and Mexico, but all over the planet, on all 6 continents, what was their purpose? All pyramids in China, 250 of them, are oriented to the cosmic north.
If you look at where they're positioned, it does seem like, this ancient culture were very knowledgeable of earth energies and working with earth energies all around the planet.
We see granite, sandstone, limestone. We see these acting like transmitters for energy.
They're amplifiers for existing Earth's energy.
Frequencies are generally harmonically coupled, the whole series of pyramids. Because it's using harmonics and it's working with earth energies, the people in the area are going to be affected by it too, because we resonate with earth frequencies too.
If the Earth itself has an energetic connection with pyramids, is it possible that humans too are resonating with these structures? What effect might that have on us?
Man's prime resonant frequency is the same as the Earth at 7.82 hertz, and it realigns our genome.
And is credited with discovering the Bosnian pyramids, where he claims to have witnessed their healing properties firsthand. Dr. Osmanagic invited Open Minds host Regina Meredith to experience this for herself, deep within the Pyramid of the Sun.
We've had so many people telling us that they feel so good, that if they had asthma, once they got out, asthma, basically they can breathe.
I have for a long while argued that the central concept of the pyramids of Egypt, and I think the case is true all over the world, was to do with the transformation of human consciousness. Whatever else the Great Pyramid is, it is for sure an instrument that works upon human consciousness.
It is clear that pyramids were of profound significance to ancient civilizations. Evidence suggests these structures served a variety of purposes. By unlocking the secrets of the pyramid, we may open the door to a universe of possibility. Interesting to note that in the Egyptian depictions of gods, they are not holding a bag, but an important symbol called the Ankh. The Ankh depicts immortality and life. It is also connected with Isis and the planet Venus.
Why does it depict life and immortality? Why do they believe that? Is it because of one of the tools in order to induce resonant frequency on dead tissue to reanimate, reincarnate, restore, or transfer consciousness? Is the Ankh?
La pyramide, je pense, a été créée pour refaire.
In my view, the Great Pyramid was built by Isis. I believe it was created to reincarnate Osiris into Horus. We know that the Giza Plateau is full of underground passages. I believe that the clan of Osiris lived there. As far as the resurrection of Osiris into Horus is concerned, Isis organizes it. The texts are very clear about that, and we understand that she used Osiris's genetic code to create Horus. She created the Great Pyramid in order to accomplish this task. The Great Pyramid allowed Isis to find Osiris's soul again. We don't really know how, but she would have put Horus's genetic code in the pyramid. She would have been able to create another body using Osiris's genetic code.
She didn't use his genetic code. She reassembled his body because Set had cut him into pieces after sending him down the river inside of a sarcophagus. That's what the hieroglyphs say happened. She put his body in the king's tomb, reassembled it, and used the pyramid's energy to resurrect him. This is what the hieroglyphs say. It doesn't say anything about genetic code.
There is evidence that below the monument, something existed there that was much older.
Prior to the Egyptians, about 10,000 years before that, it was a sacred site just like Göbekli Tepe, and then the pyramids were built over top of that.
We're being reused, should we say, partially reconstructed, built upon during dynastic times. Just like the Sphinx itself was being repaired during dynastic times. But I'm also convinced that at least the core of those pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid and the Second Pyramid, go back to a much earlier period. So for instance, the Great Pyramid is actually built on what I would call a sacred mound, and this is acknowledged even by the Egyptologists. Now they say it all goes back to the 4th dynasty, circa 2500 BC, but my analysis is that at least the core, the original portions, for instance, the descending passage, the subterranean chamber, go back to a much earlier period. Then it was built over.
Could this be proof of the clan of Osiris and their knowledge? And could this group have harnessed the powers of the universe to bring back a god?
The same energy still works the same way today.
The Great Pyramid itself has always been connected with the afterlife.
What you'll find inside those pyramids is acres and acres and acres of texts, deeply inscribed into the walls. They belong to the same vast body of literature to which belongs the famous ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. And the ultimate moment in your journey through the Duat is your entry into the judgment hall of Osiris, the hall of Ma'at, and where you will be asked to account for everything that you've done with your life.
My conscience is clear. I'm telling people the truth.
Text from both Sumerian cuneiforms and Egyptian books suggest the Great Pyramid as a place to resurrect the dead. Could there be another hidden message?
There is an ancient code to be found within the Great Pyramid. It's within the geometry, not just of the pyramid itself, but its relationship to the other two main pyramids of the Giza Plateau.
All this talk of geometry and mathematics is a distraction.
It seems to be related very much to do with the idea of the music of the spheres, the idea that there is some kind of connection between the primal tones of the universe itself and their relationship to the creation of form and structure in the physical world, and that to somehow attune and enhance this connection, that certain proportions have to be constructed into the design of the pyramid and also the geometry of the landscape itself. And these seem to reflect the musical intervals, in particular those which are known as the perfect fourth, which has a ratio of 4:3, and those known as the perfect fifth, as a ratio of 3:2, one of which is an inverse form of the other.
If the Great Pyramid is indeed a construction to harmonize creation, wherein lies the code to such a great power?
The Great Pyramid is situated within a whisker of latitude 30. It seems like the latitude choice was derived from astronomy.
That's a poor assumption. The Egyptians did not choose the location of where the pyramid was going to be or what its orientation was going to be. It started as a cymatic pattern burned into the soil by electromagnetic energy that was radiating from the core of the earth.
Very deliberate choice, because it's not a random latitude. It's 1/3 of the way between the equator and the North Pole. This is just one of the many ways, I feel, in which the Great Pyramid deliberately and purposefully speaks to our planet.
You feel wrong. Each individual continent has a site or more than one site where man was created. Great Pyramid just happens to be one of those sites. All this business about measuring the Great Pyramid and finding that the earth would fit inside of triangulation of the pyramid if you scale it up 43,000 times. It's just a mathematician trying to drive a square peg through a round hole with a mallet just so he can say it fits.
If you look into the biblical story, the walls of Jericho, what happened there? They encircled the city, and they began to chant in a way that created a frequency that caused the walls to collapse. It's all about frequency and vibration. They weaponized sound, is what they did. That's a true story, you know? So it's all about understanding how sound works and how frequencies work. Thoth actually was able to combine cymatic frequencies and light waves to create solid matter. So you can create solid physical matter, which we learned yesterday. We talked about in the morning, yesterday morning, we talked about creating solid matter from light. And scientists have now finally achieved it. So we're just rediscovering everything. We can create solid matter from light. we can alter matter and bend matter from cymatic frequencies and vibrations. We understand now that this pattern you see, there you go, underneath the image there, that pattern is part of a frequency or vibration, ultimately that really stems from strings, vibrating strings in the universe. And those vibrating strings, they brush across or run across us every Planck second of every Planck moment of every day. So that alters your DNA. So if you have the genetics of a cheetah, when that frequency hits you, that's coming through the universe with these vibrating strings, it puts the pattern on your back. If you're a turtle, it puts the pattern on the back of your shell. All of these things, it gives us shape, it gives us form, it gives us all the different appearances, it gives us our different features. It's based on how your genetics and your DNA responds to these vibrating sources, these cymatic vibrations. That's really how your body is set up, and how all the patterns of life are all set up based off of these vibrations. The zebra gets its stripes from the vibrations that are emanating from strings. Okay, so that's how it works. Everything is based off of vibration and frequency. Everything. Pretty interesting stuff. We brushed on this a little bit the last time, but I wanted to bring this up to some of the new people. A lot of people, haven't seen some of the science. This is actually in my book behind, the Great Pyramid at Giza. It's really an amazing structure, obviously mathematically, what it has and what it can do. But the amazing thing is the correlation. Oh, here, look, I went right up. As soon as I open the book, that's crazy. It's right there. The whole thing is in there, guys. It's really amazing with the Great Pyramid, the science that's built into it about this planet. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier.
This is a really good and accurate description of exactly what goes on. I didn't go to college. I haven't been studying it for years. I seen this in a vision from tapping into divine energy. This is what I saw. What he's saying is what I know to be true.
It's 432 hertz, okay? And as you know, all of my music is encoded at 432 because it's a healing frequency. It's a realignment frequency. It's a vibrational frequency that's good for humans to listen to. 440 hertz is what most music comes out on the radio, and it literally is set to destroy your brain. Literally, it used to be 432, and then the media mogul, people in control of the media, which was actually the Rockefeller Foundation, they actually requested it be changed to 440. Yeah, so they knew the effects of frequency on people back then.
Just like the film Idiocracy. Who owns Hollywood?
Could the ancient builders have given us a monument to decode our human existence? Interestingly enough, the numbers Tesla was obsessed with show up in the equations of the Great Pyramid. The numbers Graham has concluded from his research on the pyramid are 72, 43,200, 600, 30, 25,920, and 2,160. And all of those numbers either equal 3, 6, or 9.
Then let's give you one more example. Let's track east from Giza. Let's go off to Cambodia, to Angkor in Cambodia. An amazing site, again, very much devoted to the investigation of the mystery of death. The very word Angkor actually has a meaning in the ancient Egyptian language. It means life to the Horus. And lo and behold, it turns out that Angkor, with its pyramidal monuments, Angkor lies exactly 72 degrees of longitude east of Giza. I do not believe that that is an accident or a coincidence.
What we're looking at is that is one of the nodal points that the Earth chose. Simple as that.
Could these precise calculations be spread across the globe and communicating a code? Is it possible this is what Nikola Tesla tapped into?
Absolutely. Look at the symbology on his family tree. His father was a minister with occult knowledge, and he was a Knights Templar.
The way we read the universe is through mathematics and through its geometry. Through its mathematics and geometry, we need to know, slowly through our evolution, we begin to work out how triangles work, circles, ellipses, various shapes, and now work out the numbers, how they produce numbers. So having said this, the language that we as human beings, will be communicating. I don't think we'll be talking English or Chinese in the next 2-3 centuries. Already we're using a different language using computers. I think we'll be talking mathematics in the sense that to get a pure idea out, to get a pure thought out and to structure it so that you understand exactly what I'm talking about, the shape, the size, the dimension, the weight, the speed, I'll have to number it, I'll have to put mathematics. The Great Pyramid is speaking that language, it's transmitting that language. It's a silent language, if you like, that needs to be read. We don't need Egyptologists, we don't need experts in hieroglyphs. It doesn't have hieroglyphs. We need mathematicians. We need mathematicians to read it. And that's one of the goals, is to tempt them to get into this. We've moved in a direction where we rely on external knowledge. We seem to think that the answer is out there and we look for it. Well, the answer may be inside us. I truly believe this. And therefore we need to rechange how we see ourselves and how we educate ourselves. I think what's interesting now is that the science is beginning to sort of touch the frontiers of what you would call in general terms spirituality. We begin to realize that the universe is mental. It is a mental universe. And we need to think in different forms, not just purely classical science.
You're saying one thing and meaning the other. This man is toxic. What we need to be doing is investing in spirituality, not mathematics. Once you've tapped into divine consciousness, all the mathematics and geometry will come to you. It will just be given to you as a gift.
It's believed that the ancient cultures used several resonant-type technologies, one of them being the Djed pillar in Egypt, which is essentially a column with 4 crossbars.
The pyramids were sound structures, so the purpose of the pyramids was to vibrate at certain frequencies to bathe the entire Egyptian civilization in these frequencies. How are those sounds then transmitted? And the idea is that that's what the Djed pillar was for. It was sort of like a transmitter of the vibration coming from the pyramid.
Picture it like a cell signal. You have a satellite that sends a signal down to a tower, and then from the tower down to each individual device. The Great Pyramid would serve the function of the satellite. It sends a signal down to the obelisks in the different cities surrounding Egypt, and then the obelisks would transmit it to the Djed pillars like a transmitter. Apply vibration to a piezoelectric crystal and it illuminates.
Now, when you look into ancient texts, you find that the elite of the elite gods had something called a Djed pillar Ankh.
What Billy's saying is a misinterpretation of the hieroglyphs. This is simply an image that illustrates the 3 different devices that are needed in order to execute levitation.
In addition to the Djed, they had the uaz, which is a rod that has a base that looks just like a tuning fork. And I'm of the opinion that if something looks like something, then it is that. So it's quite possible that the Egyptians would utilize the uaz pillar as a tuning fork that would literally help them to continue to resonate at that higher frequency emanating from the pyramid.
No, the tuning fork that appears is basically the Djed pillars. They put it on either side of the path, and then they take the uaz and crack it, clash it against the stone, and it would cause it to rise off the ground, and then it would follow the Ankh, or whoever was holding the Ankh in one hand, the uaz in the other. It would be attracted to the Ankh, and therefore a priest could impart a resonant frequent vibration into the stone. It would rise off the ground, follow the Ankh, and 50 yards away would set back down. There's other accounting that talks about this, but those are the devices needed in order to cause levitation. This is how they use these devices in order to build the temple, the pyramid itself. But it's the same tools that you use for transplanting consciousness or reincarnating. You just use them in a different way. Same tools. Now, when it came to cutting the stone block, they used a device called the shamir. The way it's described as a worm. It's one of the 10 relics that were created on Mount Sinai.
The Temple of Seti. It's composed of cyclopean red granite blocks, mostly composed of quartz, which means it's going to have a resonance or a vibratory capacity. And etched on 2 of those enormous pillars is a flower of life. Nobody knows how it got there or when. But it's another clue that this is the path we need to follow in order to understand how the Osirian and other temples that are like that were actually constructed.
No, it's proof you need to know how they're used, what the temples were for, not how they were constructed. Who cares how they're constructed? The significance is the power behind them and what they can be used to do. The Egyptians knew exactly how they were constructed. I don't see where that's a relevant topic. That's what people say when they want to prevent you from knowing the truth of what the function was of the pyramids.
That shape itself is one that resonates with what in the West today we call the astral plane. And so by putting this particular shape on that location on the land, you are creating a connection between the earth and the first true spiritual plane of experience.
The structures are massive, ancient, and glorious. They have inspired humanity for centuries. Some have been labeled the wonders of the world.
All around the world, from Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey to the high Andes in Bolivia with the Gate of the Sun, pyramids of Egypt, we find these megalithic constructions.
The creation of these patterns is always associated with some kind of light, either a beam of light or an orb of light.
Whatever that is, that's moving on its own. Oh my God.
Though crop formations seem like a new phenomenon, there's evidence they've been appearing for a long time. In the 9th century, Abegard, the Bishop of Lyon in France, wrote about parishioners who were possibly engaged in devil worship or paganism. They were collecting seeds out of flattened circles in the fields and using them for fertility rituals. In 1686, Robert Plot, a professor at Oxford, wrote about crop circles. He even drew pictures of a couple that appeared near his home. He said they were formed by a flash of light. Around the same time, a pamphlet was released called The Mowing Devil. It describes how a farmer woke to see a bright light in his field that he thought was fire. When he went to investigate, he found a crop circle. It's called the Mowing Devil because the farmer said the circle was so neatly mowed that it could not have been done by a mortal man. John Leland served as librarian to Henry VIII. He wrote about patterns appearing in grass overnight.
We know that in ancient times, many people built beautiful buildings, beautiful cathedrals, without knowing mathematics and modern principles.
Some of these remarkable monuments are not anything we could reproduce today with all of our technology currently.
Technology is not required. Spirituality is required. Now, these glowing orbs are not UFOs. I mean, flying, yes, unidentified, whatever. Yeah, technically, if you see something round and it looks like it's flying, then that would be a UFO. But that's just nonsense. They're not aliens. They're not extraterrestrial. I have seen these glowing orbs myself in my lifetime. I had one following me for almost an hour, and it was keeping pace with the vehicle that I was driving in at highway speed. I was a little kid. I'm not going to give you the whole anecdote, but I've seen them myself, and they're not solid matter. They're not something, it's not a flying device. I mean, unless it's a Merkaba and somebody is motoring around like the Jetsons in their little, energy field that they've created with their mind and the connection with God's spirit. But it's not a physical matter. I could see through it, and it was between me and the trees. So I was traveling in highway speed, and it maintained its pace. I don't know if I was the point of interest and I was what it was observing, but I wasn't kidnapped by aliens, and it's all nonsense. That's all cover work for divine energy. The thing is that this is about maintaining authority, and when people believe in something divine, then the state can't control their thoughts. You know what I mean? If you have a divine path and it obscures from the interest of powerful people or money, then they can't. You're going to go against them. This whole thing with aliens and UFOs started with H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, that radio show that they put on in the 1930s. It's been going on for a long time, but it's just cover up.
We wanted to make the UFO societies think that a UFO had landed, you see. And after a few years, they didn't know whether to believe it or not.
It's it's absolutely obvious. This here, you see, it's not consistent at all with a genuine phenomenon.
I just don't believe them, no.
Absolutely beautiful.
There's no traffic, there's no human beings, there's no nothing. There's a full moon in the sky, lovely starry night.
With your cheese rolls and your beer, what's better?
Cheese rolls in your beer.
So clearly these guys are not making, they set out to make them and they did it horribly. And everybody that came and saw these crop circles they were making, they're like, this is nowhere near consistent with these complex designs. You guys are full of shit. This doesn't explain the phenomenon whatsoever. So there's been a lot of people like this that have tried to come out and not only take credit for the formations, but also debunk the phenomenon altogether and just say that
it's human.
It's just humans going out there and making these things. So there's a lot of validity to this. This is not just some like off the wall stupid phenomenon. Like this is a heavily researched phenomenon that science has yet to explain how these things are formed. And this physicist believes that whoever or whatever is creating these designs have to have some type of technology, whether it's like including GPS, because you got to know where to put it and in what proximity to each other. You got to have lasers and you got to have some type of microwave technology in order to bend all of the stalks of the grass to one side, like is seen in many of these formations, especially in England. So there's a picture of the actual stalks themselves at a close-up so you can kind of see what the stalks look like.
Wheat stalks are separated by structures called apical nodes. These are like the knuckles on your fingers. In the 1990s, biophysicist William Levengood started analyzing plants taken from crop circles. His team found the nodes in crop circle wheat were elongated, and in many cases they were ruptured. This rupture is called an expulsion cavity. The only way this could be replicated is with bursts of microwave radiation. The way your microwave oven works is it heats up water, fats, and sugar in food. Microwave energy is heating up the water in the wheat stalk nodes. The water turns to steam and then they burst, just like popcorn. Now you can't fake this. It happens to the plant internally.
There's no way you can hoax that.
People who claim to have witnessed crop circles being made, and there's quite a few witnesses, report seeing a mist over the pattern immediately after it's formed. This mist is actually steam coming from the plants that were flash heated by microwave radiation. While experimenting with radiation, Levengood found crop circle seed had a huge increase in growth compared to non-crop circle seed. By exposing seeds to short, controlled bursts of radiation, they grow bigger and faster than seeds not exposed to radiation. Another experiment showed that wheat harvested from within a crop circle has a much higher amount of protein than wheat outside the circle. So there's evidence that whatever energy is used to create crop formations is leaving residual traces of this energy in the area. Some crop formations are covered in a dusting of microscopic spheres of magnetized iron, specifically meteorite iron. Researchers call this a magnetic glaze. These spheres are usually found around the perimeter of a formation, and they're distributed linearly, not randomly. Because the iron particles are magnetized perfect spheres, it means they were melted and formed within a highly energetic magnetic field. When people are inside crop formations, many are affected by electromagnetic radiation. Just look at this.
Ja, jeg har rød. Jeg får motsatt, men du ser det sånn der. Guri malla, det blir helt sånn. Og nå blir det borte. Nå blir det borte. Da blir det vanlig. Nå blir det vanlig. Ja.
Ja, visst.
As part of an experiment, a woman with an enlarged thyroid sat in a crop formation for 2.5 hours. While being monitored by a doctor, her thyroid shrunk by 40%. Often cameras, watches, and other electronic devices stop working inside a crop circle. In fact, pregnant women and people with pacemakers are discouraged from going near one. Now, to skeptics, all this talk about energy sounds woo-woo, but I just showed you the real effects on plants and people.
Oh, wow. Weird.
So the other interesting part of this too is that not only are orbs seen near these crop circle formations, but then military helicopters have been reported as coming to the formations right after they're formed.
Yes, I've seen that before.
Clearly, the military believes that crop formations are something more than simple hoaxes.
But in our opinion, the whole Circle Makers website and Lundberg and co. are all part of a disinformation campaign, possibly funded by government.
Robert Hull said at one time, the Circle Maker's website had a recruiting link that took you directly to the recruitment page for MI5, British military intelligence.
Is it possible that they were British and Jewish? Because it's important to note at this point in time that the Rothschild family, during the creation of all these different states, all these different countries, funded the creation of all the intelligence agencies in every country. They are the military defense contractors in every country. They fund the wars on each side. They fuel them and they profit from them. That's the connection. But they also created the secret societies, to include the Masons, Skull and Bones. They're at the head of all these organizations. They're not people-led organizations. These are intentionally controlled by the crown.
Lundberg got his master's from the Slade School of Fine Art in London in 1992. At this time, Slade was next door to the then secret headquarters of MI5 at 140 Gower Street. It was literally next door. The two buildings shared a courtyard. Hall makes the point that intelligence agencies often recruit final year college students. That's always been true and is still true today. Lundberg started making crop circles immediately after graduating. Hall notes that if you view the HTML source of circlemakers.org, the second keyword is MI5. Now that was in 2009, but even today, the site's keywords contain entries like MI5 and CIA. And something I just noticed while researching this episode, why is alleged CIA asset Jim Schnabel a keyword on this site? In 2004, the Circle Makers website teased Colin Andrews, who at the time was raising money for his research. Circle Makers said that if the fundraising fails, Colin could just join MI5 PSYOPs and retrain to be a crop circles maker. Now, PSYOPs is short for psychological operations, which is the use of psychological techniques and tactics to influence the perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors of a group of people. And this is a type of strategic communication used by military intelligence and government organizations all the time.
It sure is. Just turn on the news.
Well, that's true. If you spent an hour reading the news today, you consumed government intel. Believe me. Now, Hall acknowledges that these references to MI5 seem just too blatant, but he believes they're a double bluff. Meaning, if we sarcastically connect ourselves to the intelligence community, people will think we're joking. Nobody would be so obvious.
Or if you add a talking fish that wears a tinfoil hat to your show and you embed real information inside of a show shows this type of symbolism, nobody would believe any of it. Just giving you shit, AJ. I like you, man. You're one of my favorites.
And Hall found that the administrative contact for the domain belongs to a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Now, it could be a coincidence, but the man has an unusual name. Now, I'm not going to name him here, but I'll link to Hall's research down below. Richard Hall looked into Circle Makers' finances, trying to figure out how they pay their bills. Lundberg had registered a couple of companies, but they were inactive. But there was an interesting quote on the Circle Makers website.
You'd be surprised how expensive running a successful website can be. Don't panic. We're not going to ask you for money. Our retainer, from sources we'd rather not disclose, has kept our virtual head above water.
What does that mean? A retainer? From who? Who's financing them? Making crop formations is technically a crime. It's trespassing, vandalism, destruction of private property. What investor would fund that and become complicit in those crimes? Plus, there could be civil liability. If you create a crop circle and a bunch of strangers show up and tear up my field, I could sue you for that. Even if they're minor crimes and rarely prosecuted, it doesn't sound like a good investment. Hall did a land registry check on the apartment where Lundberg was living at the time. He found that technically there are no apartments listed on the deed. Hall dug further and found that there are 4 apartments, including Lundberg's, that have their rents paid by the local government. So, did Richard Hall reveal that John Lundberg is, in fact, an asset working in media whose job is to spread disinformation about crop circles?
In the summer of 2021, a report released by the Pentagon acknowledged the authenticity of videos captured by U.S. Navy aircraft and then later leaked to the public.
When the government leaks information to the public, that means that it's a disinformation campaign. They don't want you to believe what you're saying. The word UFO is just another keyword. It's a buzzword, but it's a pseudonym for something else. When they say UFO crash site, that means that there's evidence of a failed government operation. Most of the time, it's covering up intellectual property theft, or most recently, they changed the acronym from UFO to UAP, which I've nailed it down to as unauthorized personnel are aware of whatever the government op is. When they say UAP, it could either mean whatever the evidence is directly, or they could be referring to the person who is aware of it, or the people that are aware of whatever it is that they're not supposed to know.
Radiation around these spheres, and most importantly, a discovered communication network in between spheres. He has figured out how to communicate with them by scrambling their system using a binary code. A binary code that looks very similar to what was picked up and published in the NSA document. What if the smoking gun is right in the government reports? Thank you for coming on today. I think somehow some of the things that you've been studying and researching in your own discoveries, spheres, orbs, could put together some more pieces of the puzzle. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the spheres were called Foo Fighters back in World War II, and now they've become the most common UFO seen in the world.
They have a way, you think, of communicating and coordinating with each other?
Yeah, in fact, they appear to use three networks. One is a direct peer-to-peer network via microwaves. The second is the ground relay network, which uses a smaller Type 3 sphere in buildings. And then there's a ground-based network. The main control mechanism comes from the ground up. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a data link from the ground.
How have you been able to discover the way that these things are interacting with each other?
I found there was a code in the crop circle, which a mathematician extracted. And I copied it and I put it into an app, a phone app. Basically what it does is you turn the app on, and because these spheres, when they hear the binary code, it triggers them into action. So you will actually get a heightened level of activity in seconds when you use this code. And it's been tested all over the world.
That's interesting. So, because like I said, this NSA document, it shows that they had used or decoded something to some rudimentary binary code. So maybe they found a way to initiate the beginning stages of some type of a binary system.
I mean, to figure it out what it really does, what we need to do is get more information on it. You need to track it. You need to find its flight patterns, monitor its signals. Once you get the signals, they can be analyzed, and then the network can start being reverse engineered. This system goes back thousands of years. The binary code it uses is not that difficult to crack, and it's not that difficult to replicate. So it's not using any sort of fantastic encryption. It's actually fairly straightforward. And that's why I think it is such an old system. I think it's fairly accessible to anyone who tries.
I never believed that I would find evidence of a possible network, a network active today, interacting with humans on all sorts of levels and sending data back quantumly. We have several devices quite possibly infiltrating our consciousness on this planet, and from the government documents we have dug up, we have discovered that these connections work on certain frequencies. So where does that leave us?
Clips.
Yeah.
Of helicopters coming right after.
Yeah. They like come, like the military is like monitoring.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
They're probably like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
I'm sure it freaks them out.
Yeah, but how do they know they're there?
Well, people report it.
But then so quick.
Well, they're probably watching for, I mean, clearly the military is monitoring the crop circle phenomenon because the fact that they're responding to it to try to see if maybe they can catch something.
So
or
fast.
Yeah.
Wow.
The government's been tracking radiation and seismic activity forever now. They know when a crop circle is getting ready to form.
There's another clip out there too of an actual orbs spiraling around crops, and it's bending the crops down. So
what?
Yeah. So there's a lot of evidence for these orbs, and these orbs having something to do with these crop circle formations.
Groups of counterfeiters who make pictograms are not sufficient. Too often, the most spectacular formations have appeared over one single night, maybe even in bad weather, such as the famous one of Milk Hill in 2001. The greatest pictogram ever appeared until then, consisting of 409 circles, occupying an area of 90,000 square meters. Such events give even more credit to the theory of the non-human origin of the crop circles. A phenomenon that could really be the manifestation of a project concerning the entire human race?
For me, I'm personally 100% sure that elements of this phenomenon represent a direct interaction from somewhere else, and it seems to be connected with the Earth, with ourselves, our own metaphysical or spiritual development, the evolution of our species.
Once upon a time, there was a people who possessed a considerable knowledge, a civilization whose messages have been handed over to us through time, a people whose prophecies have impressively started to come true. The Mayas. The eternal charm of mystery encloses the deep knowledge of this ancient civilization, whose memory has been lost in the mists of time. Among the most important Mayan documents where their prophecies are reported, there is certainly the Dresden Code. This is one of the 3 existing codes which survived the destructive fury of the conquistadors. Called after the German city where it's kept, the Dresden Code is the most informative one. It contains forecasts anticipating with astonishing accuracy some astronomical phenomena and events that will take place. In this code is held one of the most impressive astronomical predictions of the Maya. In fact, they predicted centuries in advance the eclipse. This eclipse is associated with a figure that represents death, sitting on a throne of bones. It symbolizes the old age, the era that is ending. The prediction or prophecy says, "Woe to you people of the earth, the end of the Jaguar Knights will come, together with the beginning of a new era that will rise from the ashes of the previous one. It will be the time of the encounter with the Lords of the Stars." Therefore, the eclipse is considered by the Mayas as the starting point of the process bringing the end of the old era and the encounter with the Masters from the Stars.
April 8th, there's an eclipse. If the moon appears blood red, then we have a problem. That means that it's already started. It'd be consistent with the vision that I had of the end of the world. I also seen what was causing it.
On the 11th of August 1991, a disc-shaped unidentified object was sighted in the skies over Mexico City. It was the beginning of a long series of sightings by witnesses of an unprecedented wave of UFOs along the whole Mexican territory. Afterwards, incredible waves also occurred in other parts of the world, like Belgium and ex-USSR countries.
This pictogram symbolizes the principle of the 3-in-1, that is to say, the divinity, as we can see in the corresponding esoteric symbol.
And we have recorded accurately many designs, including Barbary Castle. There is no question that it is a tetrahedron, that its geometry does fit Richard's work.
Having established that this is a real phenomenon, we now need to know what its purpose is.
Once you have eliminated the hoax theory covering all of the phenomena, the one thing that you are left with facing you, and it smacks of it throughout, is that it's a message. We begin to see that there is information which is decodable by 2 routes.
Numerous patterns formed by the circles in the cornfields are still a mystery to researchers, whereas many others have been deciphered and the message they contain revealed.
What you're looking at here is an ancient tomb. We call them barrows, and they date from the Bronze Age, so it's 3,000 years old. And there is a person buried in there. So what this shows me is that it is tapping into the root of a human race. And it is growing from the human race. To me, it just looked like a ginger root at first view. But I took a group of French people.
Mas eu levei lá grupo de franceses.
And one of the person there was a young person, he was 14 years old.
Uma das pessoas do grupo era jovem de 14 anos.
What people now call indigo children.
O que as pessoas chamam agora de criança índigo.
Very, very intelligent, very bright.
Muito inteligente, muito vivo.
And he was getting very, very excited.
E ele ficou muito entusiasmado.
Because he's studying chemistry.
Porque ele está estudando química.
And he said that this was explaining how our cells in the body,
e ele diz que isso explica como as nossas células do corpo,
which is based on carbon,
que são tem como base o carbono,
were evolving into a phase where they will be more silica.
E ele diz que essas células estão evoluindo para uma fase onde vai ter mais silício.
And he was describing life at the level of at the cellular level.
E ele descreveu a vida no nível celular.
But because he was 14 years old, we weren't too sure.
Mas, devido ao fato dele ter 14 anos, não ficamos muito convencidos.
A week later, I brought another group there.
Uma semana depois, eu levei outro grupo lá.
And in the group, there were 2 chemists.
No grupo havia 2 químicos.
And they got very, very excited.
E eles ficaram muito entusiasmados.
And they said exactly the same thing.
E disseram exatamente a mesma coisa.
They said we're seeing evolution of the human cell towards silica. Next. And that is a flower of life here.
Aqui uma flor da vida.
And we've had a few in the crop circle.
Tivemos algumas nos crop circles.
Next. The tree of life is
A
quite
árvore da
insistent.
vida é tema que vem com muita insistência.
And there's been several tree of life.
Já tivemos várias árvores da vida.
This one is very interesting.
Essa é muito interessante.
Because it has fruit in the tree.
Porque tem frutos na árvore.
And in some traditions, in particular the Canadian indigenous people,
em algumas tradições, em especial os indígenas do Canadá,
always have fruit in the tree of life.
Eles sempre têm frutos na árvore da vida deles.
And they always have roots.
E sempre tem raízes na árvore da vida.
So the Indian person who talked to me, a grandmother,
e essa pessoa indígena que falou comigo, uma avó,
she said there is always a division in the trunk there.
Ela diz que lá sempre há essa divisão no tronco.
So as a result, she invited me to go and talk to them about crop circles.
Como resultado disso, ela me convidou para ir lá e falar para eles sobre os crop circles.
They had a crop circle on their land.
Eles tiveram um crop circle na terra deles.
And they took it very seriously.
E levaram muito a sério.
And they said, our ancestors are talking to us.
E disseram, nossos ancestrais estão falando para nós.
So they saw it as very sacred.
Então eles viram como algo muito sagrado.
Now, when we turn this over,
quando viramos isso,
here you see a man.
Vemos um homem aqui.
He has his feet in many worlds.
Tem os pés em muitos mundos.
It's also a mushroom.
Também parece um cogumelo.
Apparently, the form of life we're the closest to is mushroom.
Aparentemente, nós e nosso corpo somos muito semelhantes ao cogumelo.
Without mushroom on the planet, we can't grow anything.
Sem cogumelos no planeta, não poderíamos plantar coisa alguma.
You notice in the soil there's white filaments.
Nós notamos no solo aqueles filamentos brancos.
That is the mushroom.
São os cogumelos.
That allows the plant to feed from the ground.
Que permitem que a planta se alimente do chão.
It's called the mycelia. It's a Latin word.
It's a type of mushroom. É mycelia, é um tipo de cogumelo.
It's in the soil all over the planet.
Está no solo do planeta todo.
What this does is it takes the mineral from the rock.
Ele tira o mineral da pedra.
And makes it accessible to plants.
E torna esse mineral acessível às plantas.
Without it, the plant can't feed.
Sem isso, a planta não poderia se alimentar.
Now the problem is that this mycelium is being destroyed by chemicals.
O problema é que ele tem sido destruído por produtos químicos.
So we're destroying the thing that makes a possibility of plants to feed from the soil we're destroying now.
Under every footstep that you take, and that's all over the world.
The bulk of the organism is growing underground, and it's composed of these long threads called a mycelium.
Almost everyone knows about the computer internet. The mycelium shares the same network design.
When the cereologists, the new name given to those who study crop circles, arrived to examine the formation, it took a team of 11 researchers over 5 hours just to survey the pictograph. Reports then came in of strange medical phenomena taking place after people had been walking around the pattern.
Over the years, many people have noticed that when you go inside crop circles, that your health can be affected, or that when you walk in them, you can physically feel almost like a sort of an electric charge. There's been many reports of good effects, tales of miracle cures taking place inside crop circles. So when you start to look at this, you have to say that there's something emanating from these shapes or being focused in there. It's not just flattened crop. That these shapes in themselves either attract or generate something which you can feel when you go inside them. You are, physically feeling the effects of this earth energy being focused by this very specific pattern, which in itself may be a reflection of the energy patterns which are in the ground.
There was one woman I remember who couldn't get into the circle. Something was physically, repelling her. Other people would go in there and feel nauseous. Some people were sick. Other people said their watches stopped, their cameras didn't work. You know, all these things. Now, whether they're all psychological or not, I don't know. And, you know, maybe you want to feel something when you go into these things.
If you think about it, people have gone into crop patterns. Women have gone in after the menopause, and they've suddenly started getting their cycles again. And then other people have gone in with aching hips, come out, hips have been fine. Other people, broken bones, 7 days later it's healed.
Lucy Pringle studies the various medical effects that crop circles appear to produce.
Sometimes you get a very, very strange metallic taste in your mouth when you go into a genuine crop circle, and you can't get it out, you can't spit it out, you can't rinse it out, it's totally cloying, it's there. The mind, the mental part, and this I suppose is the biggest category, where you get your thought processes affected. Feelings of euphoria. A friend of mine who's had a really traumatic life, she's got Parkinson's. And when you've got Parkinson, you shake so many times per second. It's a devastatingly, physically depleting condition. And she tried every avenue of orthodox medicine, and eventually said, oh, well, Lucy's always banging on about crop circles. She said, I'm going to try one out this year. And so she and a friend went in to this one, and they sat in the centre just for 20 minutes. And she didn't shake once for 24 hours. Now, if we could measure those frequencies which she experienced, which affected the area of her brain, which prevented her shaking, we would have a cure for Parkinson's.
In the 1930s, a teenage girl was missing her lessons. Kath Skin had been kept off school that summer with scarlet fever. One afternoon, she walked out into this field. She sat for a moment under the hedge. That day too was thundery. Kath Skin only revealed what she had seen when crop circles began appearing by the dozen half a century later.
It was a lovely, hot, sultry day. And, you know, a sort of day like this today, as if there's a storm coming. But in front of me there was this great big field of wheat. I was chewing a bit of wheat just as I am now. And all of a sudden I saw a blessed great whirlwind right in the middle of the field. And it was throwing up stuff about 30, 40 feet up. And all of a sudden it dissipated and all the stuff fell down to the ground. And I was fascinated by this. So, and it was amazing. It was a whacking great circle of flattened down corn. And I had sandals on. So I felt that the corn was ever so hot to my feet. And all around, you know how you have a pack of cards and they all fall against each other? Well, the corn was like that in a clockwise direction, and all the ears of corn were sort of intertwined all the way around, made a lovely sort of periphery. It could only be very strong pressure to press all the corn down so hard onto the ground, and in that particular pattern. It was all the letters in the paper about these marvellous circles appearing all over the country, and some were obviously man-made, and it's when they started off about aliens that I got annoyed, because I thought, well, I've seen the blooming thing made, so I know it's nothing to do with aliens. It would be interesting to know how they are formed, what makes it, whether it's an electric current, whether it's something actually in the ground that performs differently according to weather conditions. I don't know. But if you find out, you let me know.
This lady's story is especially valuable. It's one of only a handful of eyewitness accounts dating from before the 1980s. The earliest studies of such basic crop circles were made by meteorologists. They had no reason to suspect hoaxes and wondered if the phenomenon was caused by whirlwinds.
Dr. Terence Meaden investigates unusual weather phenomena. His reports come from people like farmer Tom Gwinnett. Tom says he too has seen a crop circle forming, but his experience was accompanied by eerie effects. His car cut out, there was a humming sound, and he saw sparks dancing in the air.
As I come back up the road, the headlights on the car and ignition, everything cut out. So I heard this humming sound coming from the opposite side of the road in one of our fields, and I just couldn't make out what it was. So we walked up and had a look, and it was only very low humming, like a singer-sewing machine in the distance, more or less, you know. And it was eerie. There was like occasional small red sparks, not anything, as you could, just in the dim light you could see these sparks. Well, the next morning I went round, I stopped at the gate, and there was a perfect circle in the field, corn circle. She was about 10 foot across. That was that.
Just to prove to you, Ollie, this is what we used to get up to at night. Now I'm going in here and I'm going to start making a circle for you.
Right. I'll be interested.
I'm sure you will. Now we used to lay the stick down there like that, look.
Artist Doug Bauer claims he was behind the first hoaxed crop circles in Britain. Unknown to his wife, he and a friend decided to try to fool people that UFOs were landing. All they needed to flatten the corn was a plank and a rope. To begin with, their designs were simple, but they soon progressed to ever more complicated patterns.
Well, this was the most difficult part of all when we decided to do these designs, was how to create a completely straight line in the dark across a cornfield. It was no good following the tram lines because they would say that human beings were doing it, and we didn't want them to believe that. So I punched a hole in this baseball cap, threaded some wire through it, and this little ring that you can see here, and you walk into the field, and against the evening sky, which is then not quite dark in the summertime, you can get a silhouette of a tree on the horizon, or perhaps the farmer's cottage. He might be in bed with the light still on, and you could centre this through this ring, walk straight towards it, and lo and behold, you've got the lovely straight line that you could wish for. And then, of course, as the footmarks were placed into the corn in the straight line, we would come behind it and tread it down 4 feet wide. So all our corridors were created in that way. Well, the so-called diehards, the so-called professionals, wouldn't believe our story at all. Now, do you believe me, Eileen?
Oh, yes.
Look how it's growing.
Yes, it is, increasing by 8 foot every time you go around.
Yes. So I wasn't up to anything at night, as you see, only this.
Well, you were. What you're doing now?
There has been experiments done taking the seeds from these crop circles, and the yields are much higher than crops outside of the crop circle in the same field. So one theory is that there is a kind of pulse of energy coming up from the Earth's core or below the crust to increase the fertility of crops, which were so important with the introduction of agriculture in human history.
No one suspected hoaxes when more than 90 circles appeared in Wales. The mountainsides were too inaccessible. The lines of rings stretched for hundreds of metres. Many crop circle groups believe that there are still mysteries to solve. These investigators hope to discover whether grain gleaned from the flattened wheat has in some way acquired special properties.
How much did you say we needed, Sheila? 8 ounces.
The ultimate test is to bake bread from these ears and compare it with loaves made from corn conventionally harvested from outside the circle. To carry out the experiment, they've turned to the British baking industry's own research laboratories on the outskirts of London. Whatever its hidden properties, the grain must be turned into bread by conventional methods. Each loaf is baked to the same recipe to ensure the test is fair. Two of the harvesters have come to take part in the experiment.
I have a background in science and I've always been interested in food chemistry. So I'm rather interested to see whether the whatever force created the crop circles has in fact altered anything in the wheat. Well, they smell good and they look normal.
Normal, yes.
This is standard commercial type
bread flour.
They're comparing the taste of 3 loaves, one commercially produced, one from outside the circle, and the other from right in the middle.
You want to make sure you're tasting the crumb, not just the crust.
This is outside the crop circle.
That's outside the crop circle, yeah. Is that inside the crop circle?
Yes.
Oh, quite different.
I wouldn't recommend this as a...
You find a different taste there?
Yeah.
And there's a real bite to the tongue.
I believe that crop circles began as a rare and little understood natural phenomenon, which was then adopted by mystics and hoaxers. But as much more complicated designs appeared, I began to joke that they were hoaxes made by feeble-minded extraterrestrials. Well, there are still a couple of questions left unanswered. How do the hoaxers get away with it? And why aren't hospitals overflowing with them, peppered with buckshot by angry farmers?
So it's easy to understand.
Ele fez esse desenho, então ficou fácil de compreender.
You see, he just followed the lines that were indicated in the crop circle.
Ele seguiu as linhas indicadas no crop circle.
It gave him a measure.
Isso forneceu uma medida para ele.
And what really confirmed to him that it was to do with the pi,
o que realmente confirmou a ele que isso tinha a ver com o pi,
is the dot there.
É esse pontinho aqui.
So the equation of pi is 3.141592654. In fact, it's 5.3. It goes to infinity. You can never get to the end of the measurement. It goes to infinity.
Esse é o número pi e ele não tem fim.
So it shows you here 3 point.
Aqui ele está mostrando 3.1 4 5 9 2
and so on.
E assim
Anyway,
por diante.
it does the whole equation.
Faz
And
todo
here,
o
when it
número.
gets to here, it goes down to infinity.
E quando chega aqui, os 3 pontinhos indicam que vai até o infinito.
Although we didn't know it was the pi.
Embora a gente não soubesse que se tratava do número pi,
But we saw it as a labyrinth.
Nós vimos aqui um labirinto.
Because it's a path, you have to follow a path to get into the middle.
Porque para chegar até o meio, a gente tem que seguir esse caminho.
And you change levels.
E você vai mudando os níveis, de nível.
And to get out is the same.
E para sair é a mesma coisa.
So it is all that at the same time.
Now here's a collection of videos that I've trimmed a lot of the garbage out that I know is not true and to present it to you. That's not my responsibility to make anybody believe anything. In fact, prophecy says that nobody's going to believe me and I'm supposed to die at the hands of the rulers. And then the prophecy goes on from there. I'm supposed to return to the sun, collect my armor in my celestial body, and then return to earth. It is my responsibility to be one of the messengers and let you know. It was not my responsibility to make you believe it. That'll come in time. I don't care if you ever know my name. I'm not getting paid for presenting this to you. If anything, it comes with a cost. Telling the truth often comes with a cost. We don't have much time left.
Are we being manipulated to continue to create war and destruction?
The answer is yes, but the end is here.